Hi, welcome back to the channel. My name is Jay and I'm a historian, and of course I love talking about the past. So I have something special for all y'all the next few weeks, and that is I'm going to go over some of my research that I've done first lead up to my master's thesis, and I'm continuing as it's a very fascinating topic to me. And that is basically centered around the Anglo-German Naval Arms Race, which was one of the factors that led up to the outbreak of the First World War. Specifically, my research has been into how the submarine factored into the strategic thinking and naval planning of the American, British, and German navies. But it's also kind of branched out from there, so it's a very fascinating topic to me. So I'm going to introduce you to some of my work and what I know so far. And at this stage, it is still an ongoing project, and I hope to see it through to whatever its ultimate end is. With that said, to understand how the naval campaigns of the First World War played out, we need to start at the beginning. And that was not the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand on June 28, 1914, nor the launching of HMS Dreadnought in 1906, nor the appointments of Jackie Fisher and Alfred von Tirpitz to the lead roles of their respective navies in 1904 and 1898, respectively, nor the publishing of Alfred Thayer Mahan's The Influence of Sea Power Upon History, 1660 to 1783 and 1890, but to the establishment of the U.S. Naval War College in 1884 by Stephen Luce, and the passage of the Naval Act of 1889 by the British Parliament. Now, the Naval War College was the collective brainchild of Luce and his fellow officers in the U.S. Naval Institute as they saw a need for the U.S. Navy to provide training to senior officers in the tactics and strategies of naval warfare. The post-American Civil War Navy was beginning to slowly modernize, and the fear of Luce and his colleagues was that the education of naval warfare was beginning to fall behind the new engineering developments. Part of the coursework at the Naval War College was a study of naval history, and for that, Luce wisely chose Alfred Thayer Mahan to be the first history instructor. Like Luce, Mahan was a Civil War veteran and concerned about the state of the U.S. Navy at the time. More importantly, Mahan was a lifelong avid reader of history and strategy, as he was raised at West Point as the son of Dennis Hart Mahan, who introduced the first courses on military history and strategy to the U.S. Military Academy. The senior Mahan was heavily influenced by and featured the works of Henry D. Giannini in his coursework, which was the foundation for many of the strategic and tactical decisions made by the officers and generals on both sides of the American Civil War. Before younger Mahan reported to Newport, Rhode Island to start his tenure at the Naval War College, he was granted a year to conduct an extensive review of naval history up to that time, which he focused his efforts on the Royal Navy in the 17th and 18th centuries. The course was successful and very popular with the first students of the Naval War College, which led Luce to encourage Mahan to adopt his lesson plans into a book, which was released in 1890 as the aforementioned The Influence of Sea Power Upon History. Now, the book was also popular with readers. Even Theodore Roosevelt wrote Mahan personally to express his praise for the manuscript. While the majority of the book deals with the history of the Royal Navy between 1660 and 1783, the heart of Mahan's treatise is in the introduction. Using the Punic Wars and English naval history as his examples, Mahan laid out the reasoning for having a powerful navy and merchant marine. Mahan argued that a nation should concentrate its fleet to gain advantage over their enemy in a decisive battle to determine control of the seas. He also presented his 6 key factors that a maritime nation should have, 1. Geographic position. 2. Physical conformation. 3. Extent of territory. 4. Number of population. 5. Character of the people. And 6. Character of government. Now, while we'll go over these in a future video, which is still to be scheduled, you should know that Mahan's goal was to encourage the American public and politicians that a strong Navy was not a luxury, but a necessity for continued growth. As he noted, quote, "The necessity of the Navy in the restricted sense of the word springs, therefore, from the existence of peaceful shipping and disappears with it, except in the case of a nation which has aggressive tendencies and keeps up a Navy," end quote. The Royal Navy, at the end of the 19th century, was peerless after Nelson's victory at Trafalgar in 1805. It was the goal of the British Fort Admiralty to maintain that position. In 1889, the Admiralty adopted a new policy to ensure the Royal Navy's command of the seas, the True Powers Standard. This standard required that the Royal Navy have at least as many battleships in commission as the combined number of battleships in the next two largest navies. Now, in 1889, this was a simple policy to follow, as the French were experimenting more with cruisers and torpedo boats, following the Jean Equal approach to naval warfare, also a topic for a future video. And Russia was a strong ally of the British. Now, most of the last decade of the 19th century was relatively calm in regards to naval affairs, despite work being done to increase naval firepower, improve the Whitehead torpedo, develop the first submersibles and submarines, and continuing the development of steam engines. Mahan himself used his next sea command to two parts of Europe, especially the British Isles, where he established contacts within the Royal Navy and Court of St. James. Then he served the final tenure at the Naval War College before retiring from the U.S. Navy to write full-time. Now, during the 1890s, two European naval officers were beginning to come into positions of influence. Sir John Arbuthnot Jackie Fisher of the Royal Navy, and Alfred von Tirpitz of the Imperial German Navy. Now, Fisher was one of the last midshipmen who trained on Nelson's Trafalgar flagship HMS Victory before the Royal Navy converted fully to training their officers on shore. As such, he had the experience, the conversion of warships from sail to steam, and was a proponent of adopting new technology into the Royal Navy. In 1904, after serving in every major command, Fisher was appointed First Sea Lord, the highest flag position in the Royal Navy and equivalent to the United States Navy's Chief of Naval Operations, and he hit the ground running. Working with the British cabinet, Fisher was able to reduce the number of deployed warships from the Pacific and Western Atlantic by partnering with the United States Navy and Imperial Japanese Navy. He also decommissioned and scrapped dozens of obsolete warships that were becoming costly to operate, and started an aggressive building campaign to modernize the Royal Navy. While famously the shipbuilding campaign was centered around battleships like HMS Dreadnought and battlecruisers, the number of submarines and destroyers were also increased. Fisher was obsessed with a different approach to naval warfare, which he had developed based on his experiences, flotilla defense. Well, Mahan had argued for the concentration of the fleet to achieve a decisive victory. Fisher's flotilla defense strategy entailed the use of submarines and destroyers to serve as the first line of defense against an invading enemy. These vessels would be deployed far from the British shore and had orders to attack the transports and capital ships of any invasion force that appeared. The ability of the submarine and the destroyer to inflict massive damage on an enemy invasion with torpedoes, and the near impossibility of being able to detect these vessels with the technology available at the time, meant that a flotilla defense would serve as a deterrent. The principal method that Fisher chose to deter an enemy attack on home islands was by deploying the Royal Navy in a manner that would cause mass casualties among the invading fleet. As Fisher noted in a letter to Lord Balfour, quote, "The destroyer by night and the submarine by day render it practically impossible for transports to remain in a locality long enough to discharge troops. Therefore, as a check, to destructive raids on our territories where such aggression might be conceived, these boats should be a valuable adjunct." End quote. This threat of an enemy invasion was known to the British public. Yet naval commentator Archibald Hart was optimistic about the submarine being able to deter an attack, noting, quote, "The more the powers of the latest British submarines are appreciated, the more conclusively it will be realized that in these craft, supported by destroyers in the main fleet, we have a powerful and complete defense against invasion." Earlier, Hurd commented that it is probable that when the next war occurs, we shall find the Channel and some portions of the Mediterranean infested with these craft. End quote. Further aiding the submarine as a useful tool for the Royal Navy was that when submerged, it was undetectable until it was too late. In a late 1908 memoranda, Fisher recognized that recent developments and maneuvers showed that no practical means at present exist or appear to be feasible for effecting the destruction of the latest type of submarine, or being even warned of her approach. End quote. This lack of an effective countermeasure, along with the decreasing power and range of torpedoes, and the ability to attack both at night and in broad daylight, meant that the submarine was a perfect ambush vessel. While Fisher was aggressively modernizing the Royal Navy, Tirpitz was tasked by Kaiser Wilhelm II to construct his Cream fleet. Since spending his childhood summers on the Isle of Wight at his grandmother, Queen Victoria's estate, Wilhelm had been envious of the Royal Navy and sought to create a proper fleet for Germany. Wilhelm's efforts on his own were ineffective, as Germany was a continental power, focusing their spending on the army and the continued influence of Otto von Bismarck. Only after Bismarck's death, and discovering Tirpitz's administrative and legislative skills, was Wilhelm able to begin his shipbuilding efforts. Tirpitz's original novel of 1898 was a modest request that was designed to be palatable to the Reichstag, but had a key provision that locked in continued naval production in the future. Knowing that warships age faster than merchant ships, between high-tempo operations and new technology, Tirpitz placed a planned obsolescence clause in the Act. After a warship had been in commission for 20 years, it would be taken out of service in favor of a new vessel, which would have the funds automatically allocated for it without the Reichstag being involved. Additionally, while Wilhelm sought to obtain a fleet of cruisers, Tirpitz was able to convince the Kaiser that he could have his cruisers, but the fleet would be centered on the battleship. With the accession of Theodore Roosevelt to the presidency of the United States in 1901, the U.S. Navy began to rapidly expand. The geography of the United States and the continued interest in China with the open door policy was used by journalists to justify the expansion. Mahan was writing pieces in the major journals of the year, voicing his support for the growing fleet, commenting on maritime affairs, and continually refining his thoughts on sea power. In Great Britain, Fisher had fully established his entourage at the Admiralty, known as the Fish Pond, which included First Sea Lords and Royal Navy legends, including Alfred Wilson, Prince Louis of Battenberg, and John Jellicoe. Fisher also began to seek the advice of historian Julian S. Corbett in this era, and these conversations would lead to the latter publishing Some Principles of Maritime Strategy, the practical companion to Mahan's The Influence of Sea Power Upon History, 1660 to 1783. With all all that in place, next week we'll move on and start talking about the origins of the Anglo-German Naval Arms Race, how the Boer War was involved in all that, and Churchill starts showing up, so that'd be fun. Anyway, that's all I got for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like, subscribe, and share this with anyone who you think would be interested. If you leave a comment, please be kind to each other as we all just trying to get by. Until next week, bye-bye.